Good afternoon and welcome to the public meeting of Randwick Local Planning Panel on the 25th of November 2021. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I'm the chair of the panel and my name is Annalise Torr. Joining me today via video conference are Heather Wharton and Brendan Randalls as expert members, and the community representative is Michelle Finnegan. The panel has individually undertaken inspections for all DA items from the street and surrounding area or electronically. We have been provided with an assessment report prepared by council staff who have also briefed the panel on each application before this meeting. Today we have people registered to address the panel. The order of speakers for each item will be firstly councillors, objectors and those supporting the application, including
Hang up or press pound for more options.
Including the applicant or their representatives. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes. Any extension of time will be at my discretion as chair. The panel has been provided with copies of all submissions received in response to the public exhibition of the application and forwarded copies of late correspondence. Therefore, there is no need for speakers to repeat all the points made in those submissions or by previous speakers. Please focus on the key points you wish us to understand and consider. The applicant may wish to address issues raised in the council's report, including the response to conditions and issues raised by an objector or reasons for refusal. We may ask questions of the speaker to clarify our understanding of what is being said. We expect that each speaker will be heard in silence and that when they are addressing the panel, and that courtesy and respect will be observed throughout this teleconference. I ask that everyone mutes their microphones unless they are called on to speak, noting that we have the ability to mute all attendees or individuals. After hearing from speakers on all the items, the public meeting will be closed and the panel will then deliberate and make our decision. The minutes of the panel's decision, including our reasons, will be available on Council's website as soon as possible after the public meeting. And you should be aware that the panel meetings are recorded and the audio recordings will be uploaded to Council's website. Each member of the panel has been asked prior to the meeting to advise whether they have a conflict of interest to declare in relation to any item on the agenda, and I can confirm that no conflicts of interest have been declared. So the first item on the agenda is for the DA for number 40, the Avenue Randwick, and the first speaker for that is Councillor Kathy Nielsen.
Thank you, Chair. My concerns relate to the double garage and studio units. I agree with the officer's recommendation, particularly in relation to condition 2A, that the proposed external stairs to the upper level of the rear garage shall be deleted from the approved plans and replaced with a new stairway. As described below, the stairway must run parallel to the west-facing wall of the garage, and that the stairway must be designed to be contained within the footprint of the garage and balcony area. But Chair and panel, I suggest it would be more appropriate, rather than privacy screens at the northern and southern end, to have solid walls at either end. And then another consideration, the new stairway design, the report states on page 20, must result in the balconies and stairways being suitable for transient use and not for long-term recreational uses. The panel should consider whether there is a need for privacy screens along the western-facing balconies to avoid overlooking of neighbours' open private space. And then in terms of the garage studio facade to the lane, when you look at the plan DA09 of the proposed studio west elevation, and the description there is for aluminium frame doors with acrylic infill, well, you have to ask yourself, is this contextually appropriate for the site? I would humbly suggest no. Conditions of consent go some way to suggesting I should not be so concerned, but I do remain sceptical. I sympathise with the comments also made in many of the submissions relating to the permissibility of residential accommodation. The report gives the explanation that the proposal does not seek to change or add another use to the existing use, which is permissible with consent, as the proposal is for additional rooms to a boarding house, secondary dwelling provisions do not apply. But would the panel, in their wisdom or knowledge, think it's necessary for an additional condition that specifies that should the property be no longer used as a boarding house, that this permissibility would no longer apply? And I would think that that should be very firmly stated, just in case the property is offered for sale a little bit further down the track. They're my points. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions from panel members? No. Thank you.
No.
The next speaker is Councillor Lindsay Shuri. Has the councillor joined the meeting yet?
She hasn't.
Okay, we'll move on to the objector, Dr. Michael.
Email. Thank you.
Love. I can't remember. I don't know how to say your name. Sorry.
Hi, Chair. Michael Love is my name. Thank you for your time, and thank you to the panel for giving me the opportunity to speak. I note there were, I think, 16 objections to this DA, and I'm speaking not only on behalf of my wife Gillian and I at number 36, but also the neighbours on either side of number 40, Nick and Caroline Adler at number 38, and Professor Kerry Ann Rye at number 42. I don't know if that... By way of introduction, as the panel knows, there's a very special row of terraces in a beautiful heritage conservation area, and I think it's incumbent on all the owners to look after them thoughtfully and respectfully, and that's what we've tried to do. I'd like to make 4 points on behalf of everybody today, if I'm able to. First, by way of context, just in line with what Councillor Nielsen said, the approval recommendation states that permanent occupation of the 2 units is not an extra dwelling because the house is already a multi-occupancy building and therefore 2 extra rooms continue the same occupancy. That may be technically true, but the reality is that the occupation will be full-time and by separate individuals for whom this living space is their sole living space, meaning they will be constantly present. They will be living in very tight quarters, so naturally they will spend a lot of time on their balcony and staircase, getting fresh air, talking to each other, having a smoke, making phone calls, perhaps doing Zoom calls. They may well be working from home in pandemic days. And this will have very serious privacy and acoustic considerations for neighbours on both sides. The tenants will also not be permanent occupants, so they won't necessarily know about or observe the usual protocols that build up between neighbours who live next to each other over a long period of time. That's the first contextual point. Secondly, on the staircases, Chair, the staircase that the applicant originally proposed was excessive, really excessive and frankly outrageous in our view. It was large, high and generous, and no doubt people would have used that staircase as a recreation space. We're pleased that Council has required changes to the design, but may I ask, is there an even better solution? Instead of an external staircase, why should the stairs not be inside the building, inside the garage area running east to west, which is as our staircase is and as most staircases along that row are? If the panel decides to approve the redesigned staircase, we would ask for the strictest controls on the design of that staircase to screen neighbours from view and discourage tenants from spending time on the staircase. And I agree with Councillor Nielsen's idea of solid walls instead of a privacy screen. Point 3, on the balconies, even with the redesigned staircase, our neighbours and we will be seriously overlooked by the balconies. The Adlers are concerned about views right into their kitchen and dining area and their daughter's bedroom. Professor Rye is concerned about views into the toilet of her ensuite bathroom at the rear of the first floor, and we have similar concerns. I would ask first that the panel consider disallowing the balconies completely. Neither the Adlers nor we applied to put inward-facing balconies on our rear studios because we were sensitive to the issue of overlooking our neighbours. Why should balconies be allowed in this case? Balconies would probably allow the owner to charge more rent for those rooms, making them less affordable and detrimentally affecting our privacy, but that's not a compelling argument to us. If the balconies are to be allowed, we believe there should be permanent screening along the length of the balcony to shield the neighbours from view. Council has asked for a privacy screen but I would ask that the balconies be completely covered. I'm aware I'm out of time, Chair, but may I just make my final point before I finish?
Yes, I'll allow that.
Thank you very much. Finally, on the air conditioner units, this is a point I'm passing on from my neighbours at number 40. They've asked me to raise concerns about the positioning of the air conditioning units next to the Adler's fence because of noise and heat emissions that will enter their garden. And given that occupation will be constant and therefore so will the use of the air conditioning units for cooling and heating, they're very worried about that. And if that's the case, we would join them in that objection. So, Chair, in summary, we would ask you to reject the application outright. If you decide to accept it, we would ask you to consider moving the stairs inside or screening them completely, removing the balconies completely or screening them completely, and requesting changes to the air conditioning units. Thank you, Chair, for your courtesy.
Thank you. Any questions from panel members?
Yes, I have one question for Mr. Fullerlove.
Yes, Mr. Brown.
It wasn't shown on the drawings where your windows are from your studio. Do they face the outward to the easement stroke lane, or do they face back into the gardens?
Both the Adlers and we have windows facing in both directions, but my point was we didn't apply to put a balcony there.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Sorry, Heather, you're on mute.
Thank you. Your stairs to your studio, they come straight off the street in one long run up to the first floor. Is that correct?
They don't come from the street because we would never contemplate putting renting that property, even if we were allowed renting that property. So they come from the inside of our courtyard, running east-west along the southern boundary. All
right. Okay. Because I did see some doorways on the street on some of the other units, so some of them may have separate access.
No, we have a doorway, but the stair, you don't come in the doorway and go straight up the stairs. You have to walk through the garage and then go back up the stairs.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, that limits the parking space in the garage, but it also limits the overlooking into the courtyards.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so have we got Councillor Shuri here yet?
No.
Okay, so we'll move on to the applicant. We have Ms. Sarah Blacker and Ms. Genevieve Slater. Are you both speaking, or?
We were just here to answer questions that the panel might have. I don't know if there's anything that we need to address specifically. But just on one point quickly, just on the owner of number 36, I think the condition that's included in respect of the stairs running within the balcony space will actually, it will remove the balcony anyway. So I think that addresses that issue.
Okay, so just on that, you've looked at this condition in terms of how would it work, and can you just, because we at the panel are not sure exactly how it would work, in the sense that you'd go up, but how do you turn around to go back along the balcony to get into the units?
Yeah, so in the email to William, I mentioned that, we were only made aware of this condition when these minutes were released. So we would need to review it, and it needs to be reviewed with a BCA consultant as well, who hasn't had the opportunity to review it. But I imagine that there would be an impact on the internal layout of the unit in some respect, whether there's a recessed, opening into the unit, sort of coming in off the kitchen. So you're coming in within the units rather than at the front of them. But that would need to be resolved further. And it might be a case that it also impacts slightly on the garages, like incorporating the stair in within the garage slightly as well.
And also, presumably you were aware of the general terms of approval issued by the Heritage Council, which also required that the stair be internal?
Yes, and then that would be a subject of the Section 60 application as well. So, yeah, we're aware that there's, there's a bit of a process still with the stairs.
But you haven't actually put your mind to how it will be dealt with?
Not presently, no.
Okay. And Sorry, just one other question. In terms of the plans that we had, we didn't have the plans of the existing boarding house.
That's now been sent to William.
Okay.
And also just one thing as well on Councillor Nielsen about the solid sides to the balcony. There are actually solid sides already. So if you look at the side elevations, so say DA11, you can see where the balconies were recessed behind a solid wall. So now, with that proposed condition, the stairs and everything would be within that space.
Okay, so potentially with the stairs and the rearrangement, and noting that the Heritage Council was saying that it needed to be within the existing envelope of the... Potentially that may result in there not being enough space to have 2 units. It would have to become potentially one with a double unit for 2 people.
Well, ideally we would keep the 2 units. Now that if the stairs did come up central, like obviously if there was any implications that didn't keep it as straightforward as what we might hope, we would have to come back with a modification for those units. But in saying that, if we are able to bring some kind of central stair that within the space, we may be able to then ultimately take a bit of that space on the balcony back. But again, I see that there's, half a dozen options. We just need to work through those and see what will work for the amenity of the unit, to retain the amenity of the units. But at the moment, the way the kitchens are designed, if the units were mirrored so that the, rather than walking down the sides, you had a central hallway in each unit, it might help as well. So there might be some internal configurations that are required.
Okay. I'll just check other questions from panel members.
We note that you have provided the drawing to the council, but where is the communal room for the boarding house, and do these units have access to it?
So there is, as the units, the existing building doesn't have a communal room. The rooms are large enough that they're self-contained. So it's not like some boarding houses where there's literally just a bedroom and then there's a communal kitchen, which half a dozen units share. I have sent the plan to William, but for example, that front unit is actually very generous size and probably more akin to some 1-bedroom units or studio apartments that are available within the area. And I guess that's the style of apartment or tenancy that this building provides. And it has been a historical boarding house. So for, as far back as it seems there are any records on it. So I think, ideally I noticed, obviously if we had northern access to northern light and all that, but it being a terrace and an existing building, it's limited in what you can do with it.
So you're saying the affordable rental housing set for boarding houses doesn't apply because that requires a communal room?
No, I'm not saying it doesn't apply, but I'm saying that the existing use as a boarding house predates that set. So it was established prior.
Okay, and what is the record that there is an approval for the boarding house?
I believe that's within the minutes. It was detailed in the minutes, within the planner's report.
No, I'm asking you what record you understand in terms of the approval.
The
or
original,
your planner, perhaps.
The original approval, do you mean?
Yeah, any approval for the boarding house. I'm concerned that there isn't actually approving an extension of an existing boarding house, but we don't have any evidence that not that I can see, that there is an approved boarding house on the site. That the use of the site for boarding house is approved, period.
Yeah.
I was just wondering what information there is available.
Well, the information that we have is what is in the planner's report that forms the minutes for this meeting.
Right.
So that was the letter from your lawyers saying that because it's...
No, I'll just go, let me just find it. 1 second. Sorry, I'm having to operate off it.
That's right.
1 second. Sorry, I was looking at it before the meeting with
Sure.
Sorry about that. Just 1 second.
Chair, may I ask you a question while the architect is looking for the documentation, or is that not allowed?
No, it's essentially it's not a it's a public meeting where once you've had your say, and then we move on to hear from other people. It's basically for us to clarify our understanding of matters.
Sorry, I'm just scrolling through. So it's around page 5 that it goes into the relevant history and the registration of the boarding house.
Yeah, so it's largely that it's on the basis that it's been registered as a boarding house.
Correct, as far as I'm aware.
Heather, you had...
Could I ask further, and how will the new units work? Will the new units work in conjunction with the existing boarding house? How will that? What is the relationship between the two buildings?
Well, they're as part of the one boarding house. So, like when you say how will they relate, if you're a prospective tenant, if you choose, whatever rooms are available, you select from within the whole house.
Is there? So it's going to be managed as one entity.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
And to get to the rear units, you can only access it through the existing boarding house.
Or the rear lane.
But you can exit through the existing boarding house?
Yes.
So the ground floor plans show that that's an access way through.
Yeah, so there is an access. There's an existing access through the boarding house to the back area anyway. So when you come if you've got the ground floor plan there, even the proposed one, so you come past the stairs and then you walk in and around to the south of bedroom 3, there's a walkway out.
And they also share the communal open space. Sorry if I might just jump in, the central landscaped area.
And the car parking, is that to be allocated to these units in particular, or is it?
No.
Or
so that
car
would
parking work?
I believe one would be for the owners of the building and or caretakers. So people that come through and clean or service people. And I believe the space has to be accessible as well. So that would result in one space being used.
So one would be allocated to a tenant, would it?
Well, if they required an accessible parking space, but if not, it wouldn't be allocated. The rooms are not typically, they're not at all rented with car parking.
I see. So potentially 2 spaces would be used by people that come, the owners, the caretakers, the cleaners.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be a permanent use.
Okay. So in terms of other things that would normally be for affordable housing under the SEP, such as bicycle spaces, motorcycle spaces, that hasn't been addressed at all.
I believe it was in the statement, but basically because we've got garage doors opening at both sides and then the communal space in the middle, there is ample space for bike storage and motorbikes as well.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what we're sort of trying to ascertain is that there isn't clearly a development consent for a boarding house. So you're relying on the fact that it's been registered under a different act for it to be a boarding house. You are intensifying the use. You're increasing it potentially from 9 to 11. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And as part of that intensification, there doesn't seem to have been any review then of how your boarding house would then come up to contemporary standards, i.e. a communal living area, minimum bicycle spaces, motorcycle spaces, those sorts of things. So,
so I think So I think because it was it was considered that the existing boarding house, whilst it didn't have a communal space, it provided sufficient self-contained spaces to stop, like neighbours are concerned about tenants gathering. So I don't think anyone wanted to add to that when there are internal spaces that, are the same as what people are renting studio apartments for. And
but then that then creates another issue, because potentially there's maximum sizes for boarding rooms. 25 square metres is the maximum. So potentially if you've got boarding rooms that are over 25 square metres, are they still a boarding house room or are they a studio apartment? So we're just trying to understand exactly what it is.
And are they all single rooms or are they double rooms?
I believe they have, they can be configured for either. I think a lot of the demographic that rent there are singles, students, people that work at the university or the hospital, students doing pracs at the hospital, etc., like that. So it is usually, I think, singles are the main thing, but occasionally there might be a couple that lives in there.
But are they double beds provided?
Yes, they are, but still just
and
for
then
convenience.
Doesn't that trigger the need for an on-site manager, or is there an on-site manager?
There is a manager, but they don't live on site.
So, Heather, I might just jump in. Sorry. We've come in very late just to provide some information for council in relation to whether a monetary contribution was required in this instance. And as you said from the report, it's not. So I haven't been involved closely with the DA itself, but in terms of the way that the boarding house operates and the discussions that I've had with William Jones, it was that they are single rooms, and any approval moving forward would be that they would be maintained as single rooms. So if there was a condition of consent to that effect, that would be fine.
And just how big are these rooms, roughly, square metre? Like they're totally self-contained, and how big are they?
Well, they vary. I just need a second to check a couple to give you an example.
Yeah.
Could I ask too, do they include en suites or are they shared bathroom?
No, they do include en suites. I believe most of them do have their own en suites, but there is a communal laundry and bathroom facilities on site, which is kind of to the rear, access from that rear external courtyard.
I'm just having a quick look at the report, and it mentions that each of the rooms is 20 square metres.
The existing ones.
I'm not sure if that's referring to the existing one.
I think they're differently sized from the plans you showed.
Yeah, that might be an average. I'm just having because there are various sizes.
Mr. Chairperson, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can you see there's an inconsistency between saying that the existing rooms do not require a communal room because they're large enough to be self-contained, but the ones you're proposing, they're actually composed of very, very tight spaces. The bedrooms are only 2.8 wide and they have high windows. In other words, for somebody to communally reside or interact, they would have to leave that room. They're very, very small. They seem to not allow somebody to hang out in there for long periods of time. Can you see that there might be a need for a communal room? Or maybe Sarah's dropped out.
No, I'm still here. Sorry, I wasn't sure if that was a question for me or you were just directing it to the panel. I'm
asking you, can you see that there might be a need for a communal room?
Sure.
Look, can I ask you two other questions? Another one is, you faced the rooms back into the rear gardens of the Heritage Building, but you've got a 6 metre setback that constitutes a kind of informal lane. Mm-hmm. Was there any consideration to actually facing them out the other way?
So you walked into the bedrooms, basically,
just
and then the living space on the other side.
Just as a principle, you protect the very tight gardens of the Heritage and you face out to the lane, which probably, I don't know, like I was just wondering if there was any consideration given to that.
Yes, we looked at various options at the start. So the new rooms are around 20 square metres each, and then the other rooms that are existing really vary up to, some of them up to sorry, 1 second, up, or, 25, 23, with some of the larger ones, at the front of the house, 23.
I think
the ones,
living room, you don't count bathroom and kitchen.
Correct. So that front bedroom, 23. I think in that one, the kitchen might be within that enclosed balcony space. Bedroom 2 is 20 square metres. So some of them are under the 20 square metres just for the bedroom, not including any kitchens or bathrooms.
Can I ask you a question relating to Councillor Nielsen's observation about the materiality?
Sure.
I'm not sure what the buildings are made of on either side of your new proposal. You didn't show that on your drawings?
The existing building, like the neighbouring buildings?
Yeah, the neighbouring granny flat. I just don't know what they're made of. I think
if you go to the minutes, there are photos from the rear lane.
All right. Could you tell me what they are?
Yeah, one is brick. So the one to the south, which is sort of replicates with the balcony that faces into the site, is a rendered brick structure. And then the one on the other side is also a rendered brick, but takes a more traditional sort of style with dormer windows.
So you're proposing corrugated metal? Is that right?
Yeah, so we do have a material and finishes schedule, which is DA13. So we've got like a reclaimed brick facade with, they were black steel balustrades and then corrugated roofing and areas of like ColourBond matte cladding, which has a zinc look to it.
So the walls are going to be reclaimed brick and the roofing is corrugated and the balustrade is iron. Is that correct?
Correct.
So
I think the lane facing cladding is also corrugated metal.
No, it's not. It's
not?
The level 1 cladding ColourBond matte cladding in the imperial format, which has a standing seam appearance.
Okay.
If you're on the materials finish, it's the top left image.
Okay.
So the acrylic that was mentioned by one of the speakers.
That's just in the garage doors.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. And we don't have Councillor Shuri here at all.
She will not be joining. We can move on to the next item.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes that matter. The next item is 74 Dudley Street, Coogee. And again, we have Councillor Kathy Nielsen speaking on that one.
Thank you very much. Chair, I'll be very brief. Basically to say I agree with the recommendation for refusal, noting particularly that the upper level addition is not supported due to the amenity impacts upon the streetscape and neighbouring properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from panel members?
No.
Thank you. And then we have an objector, Mr. Cunningham.
Excuse me, panel, if I may say that I'm not an objector. I'm an objector to the proposal.
Yes. You're not. You are an objector, or you're not an objector?
Yes, I'm objecting to the application.
Yes, that's what I've got you down as. Yes.
Good morning, panel members, and I thank the council for the opportunity to address the panel in regards to this application. I do not wish to reiterate the detailed and factual 28-page report prepared by council for your consideration. It goes into the technical facts and legislative details and convincingly sets out the valid reasons for this application's refusal. This proposal, though, is symptomatic of the trend for applicants unhappy with the referee's decision to return again and again, chipping away to get their way over and above the design aspirations of council planners and community expectations. This application is yet another appeal, altering an approved development with the addition of yet another story to what is already a bloated construction. Coogee in recent years has been turned into a happy playground for developers who, utilising state government legislation to its maximum interpretation, seek to demolish and rebuild, not with thoughts of being part of the community and giving to the Coogee village environment, but merely to take from the community its advantages of beaches, coast walks, parks, pools, and in so doing maximise their own individual personal financial gain. This development is all about ultimate maximisation of an area beyond what is reasonable or allowable under the development standards for floor space ratios, bulk, scale and diminishing streetscape. The original application saw the additional level as an entirely excessive component. Nothing has changed to alter this assessment. The current application seeks to reinstate what the referee decided was inappropriate. The removal of that element was decisive in the original decision, gaining consent. The proposal only adds to what is already an inappropriate bulk on a 278 square metre single-storey property. The now approved garage is some 108 square metres. To put that into perspective, the minimum size allowed in New South Wales of a studio apartment is 39 square metres. A one-bedroom apartment, 63 square metres, and two-bedroom apartment, 90 square metres, all below the 108 square metre garage. As members will note, the maximum floor space ratio for a property 300 to 450 square metres is 0.75 to 1, and there is no maximum floor space ratio for dwellings of less than 300 square metres. This proposal already has a floor space ratio of 0.85 to 1, which will only be further exceeded if this proposal is approved. While the zoning allows, in theory, a maximum allowable height level of 12 metres, the already approved plan has wall lengths up to 20 metres on the western boundary and 13 metres on the eastern boundary. This proposal breaches the recommended heights even more. It is human nature to feel hurt and despair when you realise you've been taken advantage of by someone. Here I believe it is the community of Coogee that is being taken advantage by continual manipulation of a system with ostensibly the intent of complementing our livable spaces. It is not abiding by the spirit for local or district planning to repeatedly go back to argue the referee's decision to achieve a maximum monetary benefit for themselves and not enhance the community in which they live. It may be of interest for the panel to know that just days ago, the property, which is owned by a developer, was listed for auction for coming 11 December. And in the sales blurb, it trades on the property development application, and I quote, "Take advantage of the DA-approved plans to create your luxurious dream home in an unbeatable location. A stroll to beaches, cafes, ocean pools, and idyllic marine parkland," close quote. I believe Coogee is already the one being taken advantage of. I thank the panel.
Thank you very much. Any questions from panel members?
No.
No. All right, thank you. So that concludes the items on the agenda for the public meeting. As I said in my opening, the panel will now move into closed session where we will discuss the items and make our decisions. And our decisions with our reasons for decision will be placed on Council's website as soon as possible. So thank you very much for attending, and the public meeting is closed at 1:40.
Thank you.
Thank you.